Wednesday in Minneapolis as I join you here on the Sabermetrics Network. My name is Brandon Warne, and today I'll be talking to you about the waiver deal candidates for the National League. I joined you 2 weeks ago and talked about those on the American League side, and after taking a brief week off, get a little bit of refreshment in my body going on, I'm going to tackle the senior circuit this week. So, obviously, of course, what you need to know about this is that if the players clear waivers, they are eligible to be traded to any team for any other player who has cleared waivers or is not on the 40-man roster. A lot of times what will happen is lousy teams will put players on waivers, well, any team really, but a lot of times what drives these trades is salaries that are high with years owed on the back end. So a guy like Wandy Rodriguez maybe a few years ago would have cleared waivers and been able to be traded. But basically what we're looking at here is a handful of guys in the National League who could be dealt maybe in the next few days as we come up on that August 31st deadline. A few guys lately that have been cut or released in the National League to take a look at are Randy Wolf of the Milwaukee Brewers, who got his outright release from the club today. You got a lefty pitcher with a nice big curveball, awful soft tosser though, but had an ERA in the high fives, high whip of about a 1.50. Did have some strikeouts, 6.1 per 9, so with Wolf, you're looking at a guy who basically could come in and eat innings for you down the stretch. Not a lot of teams really looking for guys to eat innings so much as they are looking for teams to bolster their rotation or looking for chances to bolster their rotation, but some teams just need guys to eat up innings. And so Randy Wolf will be a guy that may come in without anything other than just a chance. Another guy like in the same situation as him is Jason Bartlett, who got released by the Padres. Former Twins shortstop, also former Ray and former Padre at this point. And Bartlett's career has basically been sidetracked with injuries and ineffectiveness as he's gone over to California and just been a pretty bad player overall. So now their double play combo from last year in Orlando Hudson and Bartlett are both gone, and they've moved on to younger, more talented individuals. So when we're looking at trades here, you got to think of two teams that are really going to be in the mix here down the stretch. And those are the 1993 expansion teams, the Colorado Rockies and the Miami Marlins. And again, I got scolded for calling them the Florida Marlins in a video a couple weeks ago, so I will try to be better about calling them the Miami Marlins. So, when we look at the Marlins have basically gutted their opening day roster in terms of people that they had coming from before last season and didn't sign this last offseason. They haven't been able to move anybody like Heath Bell or anything. So, if they're signed in the offseason, chances are they're safe. Now, Heath Bell, I think the Marlins would be willing to move, but I do not believe anybody is interested in taking on that contract. And I don't know if the Marlins are yet willing to eat any money. So, when we look at Marlins that currently could be on the chopping block, you have to look at somebody like Carlos Lee, playing first base now for the Marlins down in Miami. I'm sorry, I got caught up there a second. You got Lee down there with basically no power left, slugging about 395. He's hit 287 in both spots that he's played this year. So he's obviously got a very batting average driven OPS. Still OPSing under 750 though. So he would also have to, I believe, agree to be traded because I think he carries his 10-5 rights with him, but I'm not positive about that. Nonetheless, either some money would have to change hands or they would have to find somewhere that Carlos is willing to go. Another guy that's maybe worth a look is Austin Kearns. Austin Kearns just be a cheap corner outfield type acquisition for a team. He's got a 725 OPS. Basically, just a decent corner outfielder, veteran guy that's been there before. And some teams value that kind of production and that kind of, whatever you want to call it. Ricky Nolasco is another guy I would look at. 5.8 strikeouts per 9. Consistently in decline since his peak. Because I do believe he was at one time a 7 or better strikeouts per 9 kind of pitcher. He's due something crazy like $11 million next year too. So he would clear waivers on the basis of needing to be paid a bunch of money next year, and the Marlins would probably have to eat up some of that to make a deal work. One final guy that you could maybe look at for the Marlins being interested in dealing would be Carlos Zambrano. I really don't believe anybody's interested in the mercurial right-hander. Moved to the bullpen right around the trade deadline, has not been good all season long. Tons of walks, 5.2 per 9, invoking images of former teammate Carlos Marmol. So the 4.29 ERA looks pretty good. The 6.6 strikeouts per 9 is obviously not as good as he was in his peak, but those walks basically take everybody off the board when it comes to being interested in him. So, moving on to another team that's had a pretty lousy season, and that's the Colorado Rockies. Rockies have a handful of guys that might be interesting, not on the pitching front, however, because most of their guys are either young, or they're lousy, or they're young and lousy. So they may have been able to move pitchers earlier on in the year, like Jeremy Guthrie, who was just a train wreck. But pretty much right now, all their pitchers are hands off. A guy like Rafael Betancourt would have made a ton of sense to be dealt at the deadline. He's 37 years old. He's a reliever, for crying out loud. But the Rockies decided they didn't want to move him. And I think that's pretty inexplicable when you consider that the Rockies are a 90-plus loss team this year. So I don't care if he's got a 2-point whatever ERA, high strikeout numbers, great whip. If you're going to be lousy this season and maybe next, who knows? The way baseball goes, you may not be any good next year. It would have made sense to try to get some value for Betancourt. So I think they kind of missed the boat there. One guy that I think the Rockies may also look to deal would be Jason Giambi, who's missed the last month with some viral infection kind of deals. Basically had his power sapped so far this year. In 100 at-bats or 100 plate appearances, he's got 1 home run. So basically his deal was he was kind of the Jim Thome come in and blast a home run off the bench kind of deal, and he hasn't really even been good for that this year. So there's a good chance he would clear waivers, go to an American League team, maybe come off the bench as a bat. I don't know if there'll be a ton of interest in him, but it sounds like he's going to be healthy in the next few days, so he could probably pass through waivers, or may have already passed through waivers. I don't know exactly what the situation is there. One guy that I missed to talk about with the Miami Marlins was Josh Johnson, who I do not believe has any chance of either A, clearing waivers, or B, being moved even if he did, because I think the Marlins would value him too highly. He's still due like $13.75 million next year, which would be the only reason he would clear waivers. He's starting to get back to that form that made him one of the premier starters in the National League the past 4 or 5 seasons. And I think he's going to continue to steadily climb to where after he gets to be a free agent next off season, I think he's still going to command a pretty big deal in terms of free agency dollars. Maybe not Zach Greinke or Cole Hamels type dollars, but definitely a contract that's going to be worth monitoring. And so if we continue to look at other lousy teams as we're looking to kind of build a good database or basis here for guys that are maybe going to get moved off of waivers, you look at the Houston Astros, really nobody left on the Astros roster to move. They've already moved Wandy Rodriguez, and Bud Norris isn't going anywhere, and they don't really have any other young pitchers other than Lucas Harrell, who they're probably going to shut down, actually. So I think we can skip the Astros for this point, but we stay in that division and go to the Cubs. And the Cubs have also already moved some of their big pieces. One thing that stood out to me was I thought maybe that Carlos Marmol could be dealt, but he's due $9.8 million next year, and he's been a train wreck. He's just an absolute train wreck, walking like 8 per 9. So even though he's got all the strikeouts, he's just been absolutely abysmal for the Northsiders. I think if you were to see anyone dealt, it would be Alfonso Soriano, and he's already said he wouldn't waive it unless it was the perfect situation. And by perfect situation, I don't know how much better you can get than a San Francisco Giants team that's in contention at this point in the season. Going down the stretch, needing an outfielder, especially with Melky Cabrera out for the next, 42 games until the end of the season, there was no better situation for Soriano to go to. So I think Soriano's comfortable in Chicago. I think he's going to stay in Chicago because I don't believe that anybody that he would want to go to, if such a thing exists, is going to come calling. A couple other guys that I think might be looked at, Ty Wigginton from the Philadelphia Phillies. He's played first, third, and left this year. I know the Yankees have been interested in him. I do not know if they still are. But the nice thing about Wigginton, too, is he's cheap. He's showed some pop this year. He's popped 10 long balls for the Phillies. And the Phillies are out of contention, so the Phillies are going to be interested in moving him, even if they claim to the contrary, because there's just no reason not to move a guy when he doesn't have that much value to you, and you've got younger guys that you can bring up, even if they aren't necessarily big league regular type guys. So the one other guy that I might look at, obviously not on waivers, but maybe in the offseason, is Jason Bay of the New York Mets, and he's been an absolute disaster for the Mets this year. I think he could maybe go in a bad contract for bad contract swap. You know, one that I heard that was kind of bandied about was Jason Bay for John Lackey. I don't see that happening. I don't think Lackey's got any value anymore. Another one would be Josh Beckett for Jason Bay. I don't think that's going to happen either. But I think that a new start or a fresh start might be what Jason Bay needs to get back to how good he was as a Red Sox or a Pittsburgh Pirate 5-6 years ago. So those are some of the guys that I think can move from the senior circuit as we come up on the deadline here in the next week or so. A couple other stories that I want to touch on before I let you go until next week. are Johan Santana today, going on the 15-day DL, going to be shut down for the rest of the season due to lingering issues with his, I believe it's his back. So obviously we find out that he's not feeling as good as he maybe had previously let on. Has been pretty bad since the no-hitter, and that's a real shame because the no-hitter was such a big thing for the Mets, not having thrown one in their 40-plus year history, and to have Johan Santana, their prized acquisition, throw a no-hitter and then just basically fall apart in the 7-8 starts after that has to be pretty bad deal for a team that's paying him $20+ million per year for the next few years. So best wishes to Johan Santana, obviously a former Twin and a guy that we want to see succeed not only on the major league standpoint but as a person standpoint. So get better soon, Johan. And the one last thing that I wanted to touch on is Roger Clemens. How could you not talk about Roger Clemens? Clemens will be signing with the Sugarland Skeeters. If he hasn't already, he's going to throw a little bit for that Indie League team. And there has been whispers by Ken Rosenthal and others that he could suit up for the Astros at the end of the year. Roger is 50 years old. He made his debut nearly 30 years ago, 1984. So that would be absolutely incredible if he could come back and play. I think that it's a publicity stunt. I think if he still throws 87 like they said he did, it's not going to be effective. I understand why they're doing it, and I have a lot of respect for what Jeff Luhnow has done as a GM. Did a great job hiring former colleague of mine, Mike Fast, to help him out with baseball decisions and all that. But I don't know if it's a good move at all to bring Roger Clemens back into the fold just to sell a few tickets. And I know they're moving to the American League next year and all that, so you know, maybe it's the year after. I'm not on board with this one. Anyway, so thanks for joining me here on this Wednesday, this rainy, drizzly Wednesday in Minneapolis, and I hope to see you next week. Thanks, and have a great day.